will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. That happened less than 40 years after Jesus said this, and it was astounding to the disciples. Surely not this place. This is, the disciples expected the Messiah to set up his kingdom, and they were going to be on his right and his left, right? We're on inside of this thing. And his government will have no end. This is the place where we're going to be. And it turns out he says, no, it's going to be flat. There's not even going to be one stone. The Romans were so mad in AD 70 that they totally dismantled. And you still see the rubble in Jerusalem. You can see a wall there, but it's the foundational wall of the temple. There's not one stone above grade. This literally came true, as every prophecy of God literally comes true. And Jesus predicts it. Then, verse 3, Jesus answered. Verse 3. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will all this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Now, if you noticed, I'm reading out of the New American Standard Bible today. I have this thing called the Harmony of the Gospels, a great little tool because it puts all the Gospels chronologically in order and puts them side by side so you can see what's included, what's not included in each Gospel. Recommended to you. Harmony of the Gospels, it's called. And now Jesus is going to give, from the Mount of Olives, probably the 12 disciples, probably a dozen or a couple dozen more, maybe 24, 36 people in the audience, maybe 50 tops, that he gives this sermon to. Remember, this is 2 days before his death. Tell us, when will these things happen? Is verse 4. And Jesus answered and said to them, see it to it that no one misleads you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. And you will be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened, for those things must take place, but that is not yet the end. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But all these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. So he gives some of the signs that the disciples asked for of what's going to happen in the future. Now, we can see some of those things happen now. I mean, we had this huge quake in Haiti, and then right away we have this big quake in Chile, 8.8 or whatever it was. Every time there's an earthquake, you wonder, is this a birth pang? You know, we've had 4 children. Well, Carmen had 4 children. I was watching. I was a great help to her, too, just by the way. And so I've been through living with a pregnant woman 4 times. And there are certain things that you can tell about women. Now, I'm not an expert, okay? But just take it with a grain of salt. I learned some things. Some things happen with their bodies, okay? They start to show. But before their body changes that anything observable, you begin to notice there's some emotional stuff going on. There's some morning sickness going on. And you begin to wonder, especially if about the 4th time, you wonder, is my wife pregnant? Even before any tests are taken. And then, you know, as pregnancy progresses, they begin to show more. And one day, you feel a movement. Just the tiniest little turn. And that movement begins to grow until, you know, close to the delivery date, that baby's kicking and letting you know it's there. And there's contractions that begin. Sometimes it's called false labor. Sometimes you go to the hospital thinking now's the time. Turns out they send you back home. Tell you to take a walk or drink some wine, as they told us, or do whatever, you know, is the thing of the day to see if this is the real deal. But I'll never forget, in the evening especially, as there's a contraction or two here or there, as the anxious father, I'm waiting, I'm watching, I'm timing, because the doctor gives you a schedule. And when the contractions are this far apart, you know, your bag's already packed, you've already had the breathing class or whatever they teach these days, and you're off to the hospital. And so these contractions, they intensify and they become more frequent. And that's, I believe, why Jesus is saying this is like birth pangs. We see earthquakes today, we have for a long time. But as we see the intensity of all these signs coming together, we should start getting our clock out. We should start looking and saying, is it coming close? And one day it will be unmistakable. And notice what advice he gives. Now remember, this is 2 days before the cross. He saved this till the very end of his ministry. For one, it'd probably freak out his disciples, and they were thinking about it the whole time. But just think, in 2 days from now, they'll be standing at the cross with a dead body hanging on it and wondering what happened to their dreams, what happened to this kingdom, what happened to this Messiah that they had put so many hopes into. And these words would come back to their mind of Jesus' prediction of his return. Well, where did we leave off? The birth pangs. Verse 9, then they will deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations on account of my name. You think it's bad now? Some of you may have lost your job because you're a Christian, because you speak Christ to people, because you're only following Jesus. He says it's going to get much, much worse. Verse 10, and at that time many will fall away and will deliver up one another and hate one another. In other words, the hotter it gets, the more it will become clear who's a true believer and who's just faking it. Verse 11, and many false prophets will arise and will mislead many. Joseph Smith will get a lot more company. There'll be a lot of prophets saying, I speak for God, I hear from God, this is the new message. And they will be multiplied, it says, but don't be misled. Verse 12, and because lawlessness is increased, most people's love will grow cold. There'll be a desertion. Verse 13, but the one who endures to the end, he shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world for a witness to all the nations, and then the end shall come. Christ says, and this is a positive note, he says, I'm not coming back until everyone has an opportunity, until the gospel is heard in every corner of this planet. Verse 15, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, this is a technical term from the book of Daniel, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Now, what is this? Without going into a long explanation, this, I believe, is the Antichrist who at the 3.5-year mark of the 7-year tribulation declares himself to be God. Okay? And he does something so immoral, so blasphemous, so clearly to any Christian who knows the Bible, this is it. This man has just put himself in the place of Jesus Christ as Savior of the world. When that happens, Jesus says, watch this, verse 16, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to get the things out that are in his house. And let him who is in the field not turn back to get his cloak. He says, leave, run, do it now. Don't even pick up your stuff. That is an intense moment in history. Skip down to verse 21. For then there'll be a great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever shall. He says this is a time in history where it's going to get so bad no one's ever seen it this bad before. Now, we've seen some bad stuff. I mean, you take the Holocaust, for one thing. And we've seen some disastrous things happen in pockets around the globe. We've seen ethnic cleansing. We've seen nuclear explosions. I mean, we've seen things isolated here and there, and you get the idea that all of it's going to happen at once. You know, it was this year that I saw on Discovery Channel or History Channel or one of those channels, like the 7 things that could destroy the earth, and that it talked about if a meteorite hit, how it would just have this huge explosion, this dust cloud would go in and block out the sun and change life as we know it, if not destroy it. Or a super volcano, and I think there's one right there in Yellowstone. So if it goes off, don't pack your bags. We're toast. And so that's another way the earth can be destroyed. And then one of them was biological disaster. The H1N1 demonstrates how global any plague now is because of travel and everything. I mean, you could see with these kinds of diseases how quickly something, if it's deadly, could wipe out many of our population in the world. Or nuclear holocaust, we've seen that. Or earthquakes. You know, most